keep reading the Book of Three. We're on Chapter 12, The Wolves. For a time during the day, Taryn believed they had at last outdistanced the Cauldron-born. But late that afternoon the warriors reappeared behind a distant fringe of trees. Against the westering sun, the long shadows of the horsemen reached across the hill slope towards the flatlands, where the small troop struggled onward. "We must stand against them sooner or later," Taryn said, wiping his forehead. "Let it be now. There can be no victory over the Cauldron-born, but with luck we can hold them off for a little while. If Elenway and Gurgi can escape, there's still a chance." Gurgi, draped over Mellingar's saddle, immediately sat up with a great outcry. "No, no, faithful Gurgi stays with the mighty lord who spared his poor and tender head. Happy, grateful Gurgi will fight too, with slashings and gashings." "We appreciate your sentiments," said Fluter, "but with that leg of yours you're hardly up to slashing and gashing or anything at all." "I'm not going to run either," Elenway put in. "I'm tired of running and having my face scratched and my robe torn, all on account of these stupid warriors." She jumped lightly from the saddle and snatched up a bow and a handful of arrows from Taryn's pack. "Elenway, stop!" Taryn cried. "These are deathless men. They cannot be killed." Although encumbered by the long sword hanging from her shoulder, Elenway ran faster than Taryn. By the time he caught up with her, she had climbed a hillock and was stringing the bow. The Cauldron-born galloped against the plain. The sun glinted on their drawn swords. Taryn seized the girl by the waist and pulled her away. He received a sharp kick in the shins. "Must you always interfere with everything?" Elenway asked indignantly. Before Taryn could reach for her again, she held an arrow towards the sun, murmured a strange phrase, knocked the arrow, and loosed it in the direction of the Cauldron-born. The shaft arched upward and almost disappeared against the bright rays. Open-mouthed, Taryn watched the shaft while it began its descent. As the arrow plummeted towards the earth, long, silvery streamers sprang from its feathers. In an instant, a huge spider-web glittered through the air and drifted towards the horsemen. Fluter, who had just then run up, stopped in amazement. "Great Belen!" he exclaimed. "What's that? Doesn't look like decorations for a feast." "Oh, it looks like decorations for a feast." The web slowly settled over the Cauldron-born, but the pallid warriors paid no heed. They spurred their mounts onwards, and the strands of web broke and melted away. Elenway clapped a hand to her mouth. "It didn't work!" she cried, almost in tears. "The way Ashrin does it, she makes it into this big sticky rope. Oh, it's gone all wrong. I tried to listen behind the door when she was practicing, but I missed something important." She stamped her foot and turned away. "Take her from here," Taryn called to the bard. He unsheathed his sword and faced the Cauldron-born. Within moments they would be upon him. But even as he braced for their onslaught, he saw the horsemen falter. The Cauldron-born reined up suddenly, and then without gesture turned their horses and rode silently towards the hills. "It worked! It worked after all!" cried the astonished Fluter. "No," Elenway shook her head with discouragement. "Something turned them away, but I'm afraid it wasn't my spell." She unstrung the bow and picked up the arrow she had dropped. "I think I know what it is," Taryn said. "They're returning to Iran. Gwydion told me they could not stay long from Anuvin. Their power must have been waning ever since we left Spiral Castle. They've reached the limit of their strength right here." "I hope they don't have enough to get back to Anuvin," Elenway cried. "I hope they fall to pieces or shrivel up like bats." "I doubt they will," Taryn said, watching the horsemen slowly disappear over the ridge. "They must know how long they can stay and how far they can go, and still return to their master." He gave Elenway an admiring glance. "It doesn't matter. They're gone." And that was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. Gwydion had a mesh of grass that burst into flames, but I've never known anybody else who could make a web like that. Elenway looked at him in surprise. Her cheeks blushed brighter than the sunset. "Why, Taryn of Caer Daldon," she said, "I think that's the first polite thing you've said to me." Then suddenly Elenway tossed her head and sniffed. "Of course I should have known. It was a spider's web. You were more interested in that. You didn't care whether I was in danger." She strode haughtily towards Gurgi and Mellingar. "But that's not true!" Taryn called. I was—" By then Elenway was out of earshot. Crestfallen, Taryn followed her. "I can't make sense out of that girl," he said to the bard. "Can you?" "Never mind," Fluter said. "We aren't really expected to." The next night they continued to take turns standing at guard, though much of their fear had been lifted since the cauldron-born had vanished. Taryn was the last watch before dawn. He was awake before Ellenway's had ended. "You'd better sleep," he told her. "I'll finish watch for you." "I'm perfectly able to do my share," said Ellenway, who had not stopped being irritated at him since this afternoon. Taryn knew better than to insist. He picked up his bow and a quiver of arrows and stood in the dark of the oak and looked out across the silver moon meadow. Nearby, Fluter snored heartily, and Gurgi, whose leg had shown no improvement, stirred restlessly and whimpered in his sleep. "You know," Taryn began, with embarrassed hesitation, "that spider web." "I don't want to hear any more about it," retorted Ellenway. "No, what I meant was, I really was worried about you. But then the web surprised me so much I forgot to mention it. It was courageous of you to stand up against the Cauldron warriors. I just wanted to tell you that." "Took you long enough to get around to it," Ellenway said, a tone of satisfaction in her voice. "But I imagine assistant pig keepers tend to be slower than what you might expect. It probably comes from the work they do. Don't misunderstand. I think it's awfully important, only it's the sort of thing you don't often need to be quick about." "At first," Taryn went on, "I thought I would be able to reach Cairdothel by myself. I see now that I wouldn't have even gotten this far without help. It's a good destiny that brings me to have such brave companions." "There, now you've done it," Ellenway cried, so heatedly that Fluter choked on one of his snores. "That's all you care about! Someone to help you carry spears and swords and what all. It could be anybody and you'd be just as pleased. Taryn of Cairdoblin, I'm not speaking to you any more." "At home," Taryn said to himself. Ellenway had already pulled a cloak over her head and was feigning sleep. "Nothing ever happened. Now everything happens. But somehow I can't ever seem to make it come out right." With a sigh, he held his bow ready and began his turn at guard. Daylight was long in coming. In the morning, Taryn saw that Gurgi's leg was much worse. He left the campsite to search for some healing plants, glad that Cole had taught him about the properties of herbs. He made a poultice and set it on Gurgi's wound. Fluter, meanwhile, had begun drawing a new map with his dagger. The Cauldron warriors, explained the bard, had forced the companions too deeply into the Estrade Valley. Returning to their original pass would cost them at least 2 days of hard travel. "Since we're this far," he went on, "we might as well just cross Estrade and follow along the hills, staying out of sight of the Horned King. We'll only be a few days from Cairdothel if we keep a good pace. We should reach it in time." Taryn agreed to the new plan. It would, he realized, be difficult. He judged Mellingar would be more difficult, but he judged Mellingar could still carry the unfortunate Gurgi, as long as the companions shared the burden of the weapons. Ellenway, having forgotten that she was not speaking to Taryn, insisted again on walking. The day's march brought them to the banks of Estrade. Taryn stole cautiously ahead. Looking up down the broad valley, he saw a moving dust cloud. He hurried back to report this to Fluter, and the bard clapped him on the shoulder. "We're ahead of them. This is excellent news. I was afraid they'd be much closer than us, and we'd have to wait for nightfall to cross Estrade. We've saved half a day. Hurry now. We'll be on the foothills of the Eagle Mountains by sundown." With his precious harp held above his head, Fluter plunged into the river, and the others followed. Here Estrade ran shallow, scarcely above Ellenway's waist, and the companions forded it with little difficulty. Nevertheless, they emerged cold and dripping, and the setting sun neither dried nor warmed them. Leaving Estrade behind, the companions climbed the slopes steeper and rockier than they had traveled before. Perhaps it was only his imagination, but the air of the land around Spiral Castle had seemed, to Taryn, heavy and oppressive. Approaching the Eagle Mountains, Taryn felt his burden lighten. He inhaled the dry, spicy scent of pine. Had he planned to continue the march? I did it again, you guys. I did not have coffee. He had planned to continue the march throughout most of the night, but Gurgi's condition had worsened, obliging Taryn to call a halt. Despite the herbs, Gurgi's leg was painfully inflamed. He shivered with fever. He looked thin and sad. The suggestions of crunchings and munchings could not rouse him. Even Mellingar showed concern, as Gurgi lay with his eyes half closed, his parched lips tight against his teeth, and the white mare nuzzled him delicately, whinnying and blowing out her breath anxiously, as if attempting to comfort him as best she could. Taran risked lighting a small fire. He and Fluter stretched out Gurgi beside it, while Ellenway helped the suffering creature's head and gave him a drink from the leather flask. Taran and the bard moved a little away and spoke between themselves. "I've done all I know," Taran said. "If there's anything else, it lies beyond my skill." He shook his head sorrowfully. "He's failed badly today, and there's so little of him left, I believe I could pick him up with one hand." "Caerdothal's not far away," said Fluter, "but our friend, I fear, may not live to see it." That night the wolves howled in the darkness beyond the fire. The next day the wolves followed them, sometimes silently, sometimes barking as if in signal to one another. They remained always out of bowshot, but Taran caught sight of the lean, gray shapes flickering in and out of the scrubby trees. "As long as they don't come any closer." Sorry, I got a text. "As long as they don't come any closer," he said to the bard, "we needn't worry about them." "Oh, they won't attack us," Fluter answered. "Not now, at any rate. They can be infuriatingly patient if they know someone is wounded." He turned an anxious glance towards Gurgi. "For them, it's just a matter of waiting." "Well, I must say you're a cheerful one," remarked Ellenway. "You sound as if we all had looked forward to being You sound as if we all should look forward to being I did it again. You sound as if we all should look forward to being gobbled up." "If they attack, we shall stand them off," Taran said quietly. "Gurgi was willing to give up his life for us. I can do no less for him. Above all, we must not lose heart so close to the end of our journey." "A flam never loses heart," cried the bard. "Come, wolves, what have you?" Nevertheless, uneasiness settled over the companions, as the gray shapes continued to trail them. Mellingar, docile and obedient, now turned skittish. The golden mare tossed her head and rolled her eyes at every attempt to lead her. To make matters worse, Fluter declared their progress through the hills was too slow. "If we go any further east, we'll run into some really high mountains. In the condition we're in, we couldn't possibly climb them. But here we're practically walled in. Every path has led us roundabout. The cliffs there," he went on, pointing towards the mass of rock to his left, "are too rugged to get over. I had thought we would find a pass before now. Well, that's the way of it. We can only keep bearing north as much as possible." "The wolves don't seem to have any trouble finding their way," Ellenway said. "My dear girl," answered the bard with some indignation, "if I were able to run on 4 legs and sniff my dinner a mile away, I doubt I'd have difficulties either." Ellenway giggled. "I'd love to see you try." "We do have someone who can run on 4 legs," Taran said. "Mellingar! If anyone can find their way to Caerdathal, she can." The bard snapped his fingers. "That's it!" he cried. "Every horse knows its way home. It's worth trying, and we can't be worse off than we are now." "For an assistant pig keeper," Ellenway said to Taran, "you do come up with some interesting ideas now and then." The companions started off again. Taran dropped the bridle and gave Mellingar her head. With the half-conscious Gurgi bound to her saddle, the white horse trotted swiftly ahead at a determined gait. By mid-afternoon, Mellingar had discovered one pass which, Fluter admitted, he himself would have overlooked. As the day wore on, Mellingar led them swiftly through the rocky defiles of the high ridges. It was all the companions could do to keep up with her. When she cantered along a long ravine, Taran lost sight of her for a moment, and hurried forward in time to glimpse the mare turning sharply into an outcropping of white stone. Calling the bard and Ellenway to follow quickly, Taran ran ahead. He stopped suddenly. To his left, on a high shelf of rock, crouched before him was an enormous wolf, with golden eyes and a lolling red tongue. Before Taran could draw his sword, the lean animal sprang. It was such a great time to finish the chapter with the trash truck right outside making noise. And that was the end of the chapter. Next time we'll read The Hidden Valley, which is chapter 13. We're past the halfway point. There's 20 chapters in the book, so we have 7 left. I hope you're enjoying the story. Thank you for putting up with my very tired reading. I set out to film these things when it's light enough outside that you can see me, but when it's not too hot that it doesn't matter if I open the windows and the door. But that's early. It gets hot really early. So I basically do it right after I get up, which is nice. It's a good way to start the morning. I think a better way might be coffee. I need to find a way to fit that into my schedule. Anyways, I'll see you guys next time. Until then, stay happy and stay safe. Goodbye.